What if the weight of your past could crush you at any moment, leaving behind only regrets and unfulfilled dreams? For Al Capone, a name synonymous with organized crime and power in 1920s America, this question loomed larger than the prison walls that had confined him for years. As he lay in a hospital bed, ravaged by illness and facing the end, he was haunted not by the enemies he had made or the battles he had fought, but by the broken bond with his brother, Ralph. The bitter taste of regret was sharper than any blade, igniting a desperate yearning for redemption that he believed could only be found in the act of forgiveness. Al Capone was not just a notorious gangster. He was a man molded by dreams and vulnerabilities. Despite the fearsome reputation he had cultivated, beneath the hardened exterior lay a boy who once dreamed of a life filled with laughter, love, and family. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Brooklyn, Al was deeply influenced by the love and support of his family, particularly by his brother Ralph, whose unwavering loyalty had always been a source of strength. Yet as Al climbed the treacherous ladder of crime and power, he became ensnared in a world that demanded ruthlessness and sacrifice. The very ambition that had propelled him to the pinnacle of success had also led to a devastating rift with Ralph, severing the ties that once bound them. In the dimly lit hospital room, with the beeping of machines and the sterile smell of antiseptic, Al found himself confronting the ghosts of his past. Outside the window, the city of Chicago pulsed with life, a stark contrast to the isolation he felt in that moment. The streets that had once echoed with his name now whispered tales of betrayal and loneliness. The vibrant nightlife, the grand parties, the adoration of the masses, all of it felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the profound emptiness of his current reality. The enemy he faced now was not the law or rival gangs, but the crushing weight of his own choices. The main conflict of Al's story was not just his failing health, but the emotional turmoil stemming from his fractured relationship with Ralph. Decades had passed since they last spoke, and the chasm between them had grown wider with each passing year. The memories of laughter shared and childhood dreams exchanged had been replaced by hurtful words and accusations. Al's heart ached, not just for the brother he had lost, but for the man he could have been had he chosen a different path. The thought of approaching Ralph, of seeking forgiveness, filled him with dread. Would his brother even want to see him again? Could he ever forgive the betrayals and the pain that Al had caused? As he lay there, contemplating the gravity of his situation, the reality of his choices began to sink in. The gang wars, the betrayals, the endless pursuit of wealth and power, all of it had culminated in a life that felt profoundly unfulfilled. The emotional scars ran deep, and Al realized that they had shaped his very identity. He had fought against the world, but this time the battle was against himself. In a poignant moment of clarity, Al understood that the journey toward redemption was not just about seeking forgiveness from Ralph. It was also about forgiving himself. The question lingered. Could he muster the courage to confront the past and embrace the hope of a new beginning? As he struggled with this internal conflict, the weight of his decisions bore down heavily upon him, intertwining his physical suffering with emotional turmoil. The hospital room became a sanctuary of reflection, a space where Al could finally grapple with the truths he had long avoided. The flickering fluorescent lights above cast shadows that seemed to dance in rhythm with his racing thoughts. He envisioned Ralph's face, etched with disappointment and sorrow, and felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to bridge the chasm that had formed between them. Yet the fear of rejection paralyzed him. In this moment of vulnerability, Al began to reflect on the many friendships he had forged during his rise to power. They had been built on mutual benefit and shared ambitions, yet he realized that they were fragile, lacking the deep roots of genuine connection. He had surrounded himself with people who feared and respected him, but none who truly loved him. The loneliness that accompanied his success was suffocating, and it struck him that perhaps the greatest betrayal had been to himself, allowing ambition to eclipse the most important relationships in his life. As he lay in that sterile hospital bed, Al Capone understood that the path to redemption would not be easy. It would require humility, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the consequences of his past actions. The emotional scars he bore were reminders of the choices he had made, and they fueled his determination to reach out to Ralph, not just for his own peace, but for the chance to heal the wounds they both carried. The hourglass was running out of sand, and the urgency of his situation pressed against him like a vice. In that moment, Al made a choice, to seek reconciliation with his brother and embrace the possibility of forgiveness. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but it was a journey he was willing to undertake, driven by the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, redemption could be found even in the twilight of his life. As Al closed his eyes, a sense of determination washed over him. The world outside continued its relentless march forward, but within him a flicker of hope ignited. The dream of mending his broken bond with Ralph became the beacon guiding him through the darkness, a light illuminating the path toward his long-awaited redemption. The days turned into weeks as Al Capone lay in his hospital bed, the weight of his past pressing down with a relentless grip. Each moment became a battleground where the specters of his choices confronted him, taunting him with echoes of laughter that once filled the air and the warmth of familial love that now felt like a distant dream. The physical pain he endured was nothing compared to the emotional turmoil that churned within him. He could feel the walls of regret closing in, squeezing the breath from his lungs, and with it any hope of redemption. As he wrestled with his thoughts, Al was visited by an array of characters from his past, some friends, some foes, and some mere phantoms of memory. There was Johnny, a former associate who had once revered Al as a king, but now looked upon him with pity. Johnny's visits were a painful reminder of what Al had lost. The man who once commanded loyalty now elicited only sympathy. The disappointment in Johnny's eyes struck Al harder than any bullet. "You had it all, Al," Johnny would say softly, shaking his head. "And now look at you." Each visit felt like a new wave crashing against the fragile dam of Al's resolve, testing his will to confront the ghosts he had long tried to ignore. He felt the urge to dismiss Johnny's pity with bravado, to remind him of the power they once wielded together. But the truth was, Al was tired. Tired of the bravado, tired of the facade. The bravest thing he could do now was to confront the truth about himself and the choices that had led him to this moment. Then there was Clara, a nurse who tended to Al's needs with a gentle touch. She was a woman who had seen the best and worst of humanity in her years of service, yet she treated him not as a criminal, but as a man in need of compassion. Clara had her own struggles, having grown up in a world that whispered the worthlessness of women who dared to dream. Her resilience inspired Al in ways he hadn't expected. "You're not just the man they say you are, Al," she told him one day, her eyes searching his for understanding. "You can still change. There's still time." Her words resonated deeply within him, igniting a flicker of hope that perhaps redemption was within reach. But as he contemplated the possibility of reconciliation with Ralph, new challenges began to emerge. The fear of rejection loomed over him like a storm cloud. What if Ralph had moved on? What if the hurt was too deep to heal? Al's mind spiraled as he replayed their last encounter in his head, the harsh words, the unforgiving silence that had followed. It was a betrayal that had burned bridges, leaving behind a landscape of ash and regret. Amidst these internal battles, Al's health began to deteriorate further. The physical manifestations of his past life, years of excess, violence, and neglect, caught up with him. His body, once a fortress of strength and dominance, now felt frail and vulnerable. He could sense the ticking clock, and each labored breath reminded him that time was not on his side. This deterioration forced him to confront his mortality in a way that felt all too real. With each passing day, Al found himself grappling with the inevitability of his choices. The stark reality of his situation began to seep into his thoughts. He could not change what had been done, but could only attempt to make amends. The urgency of seeking out Ralph became a driving force, clashing with his fears and insecurities. Doubt crept in like a thief in the night. What if his brother refused to see him? What if he was met with disdain rather than forgiveness? During one particularly difficult night, Al was plagued by nightmares that forced him to relive his past, the moments of betrayal, the faces of those he had wronged, and the shadows of those he had loved but lost. He awoke in a cold sweat, heart racing, the weight of his past pressing against him. In those moments, Al felt utterly alone, as if the very walls of the hospital had turned into a prison cell, confining him to the memories he wished to escape. In the midst of this struggle, Clara entered the room, her presence a soothing balm against his torment. Sensing Al's distress, she pulled up a chair and listened as he shared the fragmented pieces of his life, the dreams, the choices, the regrets. She held space for him, allowing him to voice the fears he had long buried. "I've hurt so many people, Clara," he confessed, tears welling in his eyes. "And now I don't even know if I can face my brother." Clara leaned in closer, her voice steady and reassuring. "Facing those you've hurt is the first step toward healing, Al. You can't change the past, but you can reach out, you can try." Her encouragement, though simple, felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. It was a reminder that the journey toward redemption was not solely about seeking forgiveness from others, but also about allowing oneself to be vulnerable and open to the possibility of change. As the days wore on, Al found himself at a crossroads. The emotional and physical challenges he faced seemed insurmountable, yet a flicker of determination began to ignite within him. He started to pen letters to Ralph, pouring out his heart onto the paper. Each word felt like a step toward reconciliation, a way to bridge the chasm that lay between them. Yet every time he finished a letter, doubt would creep in. Would these words mean anything to Ralph? Would they even reach him? Despite the uncertainty, Al pressed on. He shared snippets of the letters with Clara, who encouraged him to keep writing, to be raw and honest. "You're not just a gangster, Al. You're a man who's capable of love and change. Don't underestimate that." Her unwavering belief in him became a source of strength, igniting a flicker of hope that perhaps he could mend what he had broken. Al's transformation was not instantaneous. It was fraught with setbacks and moments of despair. The journey toward redemption was proving to be as treacherous as the streets he had once ruled, but each small step forward felt like a victory. The letters he wrote became a cathartic release, each word a testament to his longing for forgiveness, not just from Ralph, but from himself. As he continued to battle against his own demons, Al realized that the path to healing was not merely about confronting the past, but also allowing the possibility of a future. Though the road ahead was uncertain, the flicker of hope that had ignited within him began to grow, illuminating a path fraught with challenges, yet filled with the promise of redemption. The question remained, though. Would he find the courage to take that final step toward his brother, or would he allow his fears to dictate the course of his life until the very end? As the days passed in the sterile confines of the hospital, Al's resolve began to waver under the weight of his past and the uncertainty of the future. The letters he penned to Ralph transformed into a ritual that both soothed and tormented him. Each word was imbued with the hope of reconciliation, yet every unopened envelope felt like a reminder of his failures. The fear of his brother's rejection loomed like a specter, haunting him at night, amplifying his isolation amidst the sterile beeping of machines and the bustling nurses. One evening, a new shadow crept into Al's hospital room. Johnny returned, but this time he brought news that struck Al like a thunderbolt. "Things are changing, Al," Johnny said, his voice laden with urgency. "The syndicate is fracturing. Your old enemies are circling like vultures, and they know you're vulnerable." Al's heart sank. The world he had tried to escape was clawing its way back into his life. The mention of enemies and power struggles sent a shiver down his spine, a stark reminder that his past was not done with him yet. "Why are you telling me this?" Al asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The physical toll of his illness had left him gaunt, the bravado he once wore like armor now stripped away. "Because you have a choice, Al," Johnny replied, leaning in closer. "You can stay here, withering away, or you can show them you're still a force to be reckoned with." The challenge hung in the air, and Al felt the weight of expectation press upon him. A part of him yearned for the power he had once wielded, but the man he had started to become, the man Clara believed he could be, fought against that urge. The emotional turmoil intensified as the threat of his old life encroached upon his fragile new reality. Al found himself torn between two worlds, the voracious hunger for power that had once consumed him and the flickering flame of redemption that Clara had ignited within him. He struggled to breathe as he pondered the implications of Johnny's words. Could he really turn his back on the darkness that had defined him for so long? Days turned into a blur of pain and contemplation. Clara continued to visit, her presence a lifeline amidst the chaos. "You're changing, Al," she said one afternoon, a hint of pride in her voice. "I see it in the way you write, the way you talk about your brother." But the flicker of hope she saw was dimmed by the shadows of his past creeping closer. He shared Johnny's warning with her, and her brows knitted together in concern. "Al, you can't let fear dictate your life," Clara urged. "You need to focus on what truly matters. Ralph deserves to know you're trying to change, not as a mobster but as his brother." Her unwavering belief in him felt like a balm against the encroaching darkness, yet the uncertainty gnawed at him. What if he reached out and was met with disdain? What if the very act of trying to reconcile only opened old wounds? As the days bled into one another, Al's health did not improve. The doctors' grim faces conveyed more than their words ever could. The shadow of mortality loomed ever closer, and with it came an urgency that propelled him towards a decision. He had to act, but the stakes felt higher than ever. Would he choose to confront his brother and risk rejection, or would he retreat into the shadows of his past, allowing them to consume him once again? Then, one fateful night, the hospital was thrown into chaos. An unexpected power outage plunged the building into darkness, the machines around him beeping erratically, and alarms rang through the hallways. Panic ensued as nurses scrambled to restore order, and Al's fear intensified. In the midst of it all, he thought of Ralph, his brother, the one person whose forgiveness could anchor him amidst the tempest of his life. But the darkness was not only literal, it mirrored the abyss within him. With a sudden burst of clarity, Al knew what he had to do. He began to write furiously, not just to Ralph, but to the ghosts of his past. He poured out his heart, the pain, the regret, the longing for something more than the life he had led. He wrote of the man he wanted to be, the brother he had failed to be, and the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, he could find redemption. As he sealed the last letter, the lights flickered back to life, and the world resumed its frantic pace. But for Al, something had shifted. He was no longer just a man lost in regret. He was a man determined to take control of his destiny. The power outage had forced him to confront his deepest fears, illuminating the path toward reconciliation with his brother. However, amidst this newfound determination, he also received a visitor that sent his heart racing, a figure from his past, a man who had once been a trusted ally but now stood before him as a threat. It was Tony, a member of the syndicate who had been watching Al's decline with predatory interest. "I think you can just walk away, Al," Tony sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're a part of this world whether you like it or not." Tony's arrival was a stark reminder that the past was not so easily escaped. Every word out of Tony's mouth felt like a dagger, twisting in Al's resolve. "You think that nurse can save you? You're still a dead man walking in our eyes." The threat hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. Al felt the walls closing in, the very idea of reaching out to Ralph feeling more dangerous than ever. As the days passed, Al's emotional state oscillated between hope and despair. He confided in Clara about Tony's visit, her expression shifting from concern to fierce determination. "You can't let him intimidate you, Al," she insisted. "You've come too far to back down now. This is your chance to prove that you're more than what they say you are." Clara's words reignited a fire within Al, but it was a fire fraught with danger. He had to navigate the treacherous waters of his past while trying to build a bridge to his brother, a bridge that seemed increasingly frail with each passing day. The confrontation with Tony had left him shaken, and the weight of his choices began to press down harder than ever. The emotional roller coaster he was on began to take a toll on his health. Al could feel his body weakening, the toll of his past life manifesting in physical pain that made it difficult to breathe. Yet amidst the pain, he realized that he was on the brink of something significant. The letters had become more than just words on a page. They were a testament to the man he aspired to be. As he continued to write, Al found himself at a pivotal crossroads. The question of whether to send the letters weighed heavily on him. Would Ralph's response be rejection or acceptance? And what would happen if he chose to confront Tony? Each decision felt monumental, a potential turning point that could either lead him to redemption or pull him back into the darkness. In the quiet moments between the chaos of the hospital, Al reflected on the journey he had taken. The friendships he had forged, the people he had hurt, and the life he had once led seemed to collide in a cacophony of emotions. It was a reckoning that begged the question, could he truly change, or was he merely destined to repeat the cycles of his past? As he faced the mirror, he saw not just the man who had once ruled with fear, but the man who was learning to embrace vulnerability. It was a fragile transformation, but one that held the promise of hope. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but Al Capone was ready to take the leap, to confront his brother and the demons that had haunted him for far too long. With each breath he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the journey toward redemption would be his greatest battle yet, and he was prepared to fight. The turning point came unexpectedly, a moment that would redefine Al's understanding of himself and the world around him. It was a late afternoon when the oppressive weight of his past collided with the fragility of his present in the most devastating way. Al lay in his hospital bed, the dim light casting shadows that danced across the sterile walls. The letters he had poured his heart into were scattered around him, remnants of his struggle for redemption. It was then that he received a visit that would alter the course of his life forever. Ralph stood at the entrance of the room, his expression unreadable, but Al could see the storm brewing behind his brother's eyes. The air crackled with tension as Ralph stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. Al's heart raced, a mix of fear and hope flooding through him. This was the moment he had been waiting for, yet the stakes felt impossibly high. "Why did you reach out to me?" Ralph's voice was low, almost a growl. "After everything, why now?" Al struggled to find words, his throat tight with emotion. "I wanted to explain, to make amends for everything I've done." The words felt inadequate, a poor attempt to bridge the chasm that had grown between them. "I'm not that man anymore, Ralph. I'm trying to change." Ralph's gaze hardened. "You think I can just forget? Forget the lives you ruined, the fear you instilled?" Each word was a bullet, striking Al with brutal precision. The truth was undeniable. Al had created a legacy of pain, and it weighed heavily on his conscience. As Ralph continued to speak, Al felt the familiar waves of doubt and despair wash over him. Was it too late for redemption? Could he ever truly escape the shadows of his past? Each question deepened the chasm within him, and he could feel the walls of his resolve starting to crumble. But in that moment of despair, a strange clarity emerged. Al realized that this was his chance to confront not only Ralph, but also the demons of his past that had haunted him for so long. He took a deep breath, summoning the courage that had eluded him for years. "Ralph, I know I've hurt you, hurt so many. But I want to be better. I want to be the brother you deserve." There was a flicker of something in Ralph's eyes. Was it hope, or simply disbelief? Al couldn't tell. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken grievances and a shared history that felt insurmountable. But before either could speak again, the door swung open, and the familiar figure of Tony stepped into the room, a sinister grin plastered across his face. "Well, well, if it isn't the prodigal son and his lost brother," Tony sneered, his presence instantly shifting the atmosphere. "You really think you can make amends, Al? You're just a puppet, and I'm here to cut the strings." The revelation of Tony's arrival sent a shockwave through Al. The man who had once been an ally was now a harbinger of his past, wielding threats with the same ease as he once wielded power. Ralph's expression shifted to one of concern as he took a step back, instinctively placing himself between Al and the very threat that had haunted Al for years. "Get out," Ralph said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You have no right to be here." Tony laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You think you can protect him? He's still part of this world, Ralph. He can't escape it, and neither can you." Al felt the tension in the room escalate, a palpable energy that threatened to ignite. His heart raced, caught between the fear of his past and the desire for a future. This was it. This was the moment that would define him. Would he allow Tony to dictate his fate, or would he stand up for the man he was becoming? "Enough!" Al's voice rang out, surprising even himself. The years of silence, of allowing others to define him, shattered in an instant. I won't be a pawn anymore. I refuse to let you control my life. Tony's smile faded, replaced by a look of surprise and then anger. You think you can just walk away? You're mistaken, Al. You'll always be tied to us. But Al felt a surge of clarity, a new resolve that pulsed through him like electricity. He turned to Ralph, who was watching him with a mix of disbelief and pride. I'm done living in fear. I want to be better. For you, for Clara, for myself. I won't let him intimidate me anymore. As Tony's expression shifted to one of menace, Al felt a wave of determination wash over him. The confrontation with Ralph had ignited something within him, and now he understood that the fight for his redemption was not just about him. It was about reclaiming his life, his choices, and his relationships. This is not over, Al, Tony spat, his anger palpable as he took a step back. You think you can just turn your back on everything? You'll regret this. With that, Tony stormed out of the room, leaving an eerie silence in his wake. Al felt the adrenaline coursing through him, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The confrontation had brought to light not only the threat of his past, but also the strength he had within himself, a strength he had been blind to for far too long. Ralph turned to Al, his expression softening. I didn't know if you were still in there, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I thought you'd lost yourself completely. I'm still here, Al replied, his voice steadier than he felt. And I want to be the brother you deserve. I want to make things right. The emotional weight of the moment pressed down on them, but it was a weight filled with potential. In facing Tony, Al had faced his own fears, and in doing so, he had opened a door to a new possibility, a chance to confront his past while forging a new path forward. As Ralph stepped forward, the tension began to dissipate, replaced by something more profound. The journey ahead would not be easy. The shadows of their past loomed large, and the threat of Tony still lingered like a spectre. But Al felt a flicker of hope. This was the beginning of something new. Together they would face whatever lay ahead, and Al understood now that redemption was not a destination, but a journey he was finally ready to embrace. The confrontation with Tony had not only revealed the challenges ahead, but had also solidified Al's resolve to fight for the life he wanted, not just for himself, but for the brother he had spent a lifetime trying to reconnect with. With newfound determination, Al prepared to take the next step, ready to confront the ghosts of his past and reclaim his future. One letter, one moment, one choice at a time. The hospital room was a battleground, charged with emotions that crackled in the air. Al felt the weight of the confrontation with Tony linger like a dark cloud, but it was the shadows of his own past that loomed largest. The reality of his circumstances pressed in on him, and he knew he had to confront the heart of the matter, not just for himself but for Ralph, who had stood beside him amidst the chaos. Days passed, but the threat Tony posed hung over Al like a storm waiting to break. He had watched the news with bated breath, waiting for any sign of trouble. When a report surfaced about a series of violent incidents linked to Tony's crew, Al's heart sank. He couldn't let himself fall back into despair. This was his moment to act. One evening, after a particularly rough day of physical therapy, Al found himself staring out the window of his hospital room, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and red. He remembered the letters he had written, the confessions of guilt, and the hopes for redemption. Each one had been a step toward reclaiming his life, but now it felt insufficient in the face of Tony's escalating menace. It was time to confront Tony head-on. Al summoned Ralph, who arrived with a look of concern etched across his face. "What's going on, Al?" he asked, his eyes searching Al's for answers. "I need to confront Tony. I can't live in fear anymore," Al stated, his voice resolute. He saw the hesitation in Ralph's eyes and pressed on. "I know you're worried, but this is the only way to end it for both of us." Ralph ran a hand through his hair, frustration mixing with concern. "You're still recovering. We can report him to the police, get protection. There are safer ways." "None of that will stop him, Ralph. He won't back down unless I stand up to him. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you what I need to do." Al's voice trembled with the weight of his resolve. He felt the fear, but beneath it was a flicker of strength, an ember that had been reignited through his struggles. Hours later, Al found himself outside the warehouse where Tony's crew operated, the gritty surroundings a stark reminder of the life he had led. With Ralph by his side, he took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air fill his lungs. This was the crucible in which he would either forge his new identity or be consumed by his past. As they approached, the faint sounds of laughter and chatter reached them, and Al's heart raced. He felt a mix of dread and adrenaline coursing through him. This was the moment of greatest tension, where everything he had worked for hung in the balance. He could turn back, hide behind the safety of anonymity, or he could step into the light and reclaim his life. "Stay back," Ralph whispered, placing a hand on Al's shoulder. "I'll handle this." "No," Al said, shaking his head with determination. "This is my fight." He squared his shoulders, stepping forward as Ralph reluctantly followed. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension and smoke. Al's eyes quickly found Tony, who lounged against a wall, surrounded by his crew. The moment their eyes locked, the air shifted, and the laughter died down. Al took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every choice he had made leading to this moment. "Tony," he called out, his voice echoing in the silence, "we need to talk." Tony pushed off the wall, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Look who finally decided to show up. Thought you could run away, huh? You're still part of this world, Al. You just don't get it." "I'm done being part of your world," Al declared, his voice steady despite the fear swirling inside him. "I'm taking my life back." The tension thickened and the crew exchanged glances, unsure of how this confrontation would unfold. Tony stepped closer, his expression turning dangerous. "You think you can just walk away? You think this is over?" "I'm not afraid of you anymore," Al replied, his heart pounding. The words came from a place deep within, fueled by every moment of doubt he had faced. "I won't be your pawn. I won't let you control my life. Not now. Not ever." Ralph stood behind him, his presence a silent affirmation of Al's resolve. The brothers had faced their demons together, and now it was time to face the most significant one of all. Tony's expression darkened, and he took a menacing step forward. "You think this is a game? You think you can just decide you're a hero now? You'll regret this, Al." But Al stood firm, remembering the letters he had written, the promises he had made to himself and to Ralph. "You can't intimidate me anymore, Tony. I'm not the same person I was. This is my life and I'm taking it back." In that moment, everything fell silent. Al felt the weight of his past lifting as he faced Tony, finally ready to reclaim his narrative. Behind him, Ralph's support was palpable, a reminder that he was not alone in this fight. Then, without warning, one of Tony's crew members lunged forward, attempting to intimidate Al, but Ralph was faster. He stepped in, blocking the man with an unwavering stance. "Touch him, and you'll have to deal with me," Ralph growled, fierce and protective. Al felt a surge of gratitude for his brother, the bond they had forged through the fires of their struggles, igniting a new strength within him. It was no longer just about Al confronting his past. It was about them standing together against it. Tony's eyes narrowed, realizing the stakes had shifted. The room was electric with tension, each moment stretching out as they faced off, past versus future, fear versus courage. Al was ready to redefine himself, to break free from the chains that had bound him for so long. "Leave us alone, Tony," Al said, his voice steady and clear. "You're not a part of my life anymore. I'm done being afraid." The confrontation reached its peak, and for a moment it felt like the world stood still. Then, with a snarl, Tony turned away, the threat in his eyes still simmering. "You think this is over? You're wrong. I'll be watching you." With that, he stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The crew, sensing the shift in power, began to disperse, uncertainty hanging in the air. Al and Ralph remained, breathing heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. "Did we really just do that?" Ralph asked, disbelief etched on his face. Al turned to his brother, a grin breaking through the tension. "Yeah, we did, and it feels liberating." In that moment, the emotional impact of the climax washed over them both. They had faced the greatest challenge, not just from Tony, but from within themselves. Al had confronted his fears, reclaimed his voice, and in doing so, he had redefined his relationship with Ralph. The journey ahead would still be fraught with obstacles, but Al felt a new sense of purpose, a commitment to rise above his past and build a better future. Together, they would navigate the trials that lay ahead, united by the bonds of brotherhood and the strength they had found in each other. As they stepped out of the warehouse into the cool night air, Al realized that the fight for redemption was not just his own. It was a journey they would take together, one step at a time. The road would be long, but for the first time he felt ready to face whatever came next. The aftermath of Al's confrontation with Tony reverberated through his life like ripples in a pond. As he and Ralph walked away from the warehouse, the weight of fear that had long shackled Al began to lift. He could feel the tension in his muscles loosening, the dread of being hunted easing. They had faced the monster together, and for the first time in years Al felt a profound sense of relief, an exhilarating taste of freedom. In the following days, the hospital room transformed from a cage of recovery into a sanctuary of hope. Al's physical therapy sessions became more than just exercises. They turned into a metaphor for rebuilding his life. Each step forward was a reminder of his newfound courage, a testament to his determination to reclaim his narrative. He began to see his recovery not just as a personal battle, but as a collective journey, an affirmation of his bond with Ralph and the support of those who had stood by him. Ralph, too, felt the shift. No longer just a brother bearing the weight of Al's struggles, he emerged as a partner in the fight for their future. The fear that had clouded their relationship began to dissipate, replaced by a shared understanding and a deepened bond. They made plans together, not just for Al's recovery, but for their lives moving forward. They talked about starting a small business, a cafe that would serve as a community hub, a place for healing and connection, a stark contrast to the darkness they had faced. Yet the echoes of the confrontation lingered. Tony's threats, while not immediately actionable, were a reminder that the past could still claw at the edges of their present. Al knew they had not won the war. They had merely shifted the battlefield. But with each passing day, he felt more capable of facing whatever challenges might come. He began attending support groups, sharing his story, and listening to others who had faced their own demons. This act of vulnerability helped him process the trauma and also inspired those around him. Al realized that his journey was not just about moving away from fear, but also about moving toward hope, transforming his pain into purpose. As Al reflected on the events that had unfolded, he recognized the lessons he had learned. The journey of confronting Tony was not solely about standing up to a bully. It was about facing the shadows of his own past, embracing the scars that had shaped him, and ultimately choosing to step into the light. He had discovered an inner strength he never knew he possessed, a resilience that ignited a desire to help others. The impact of Al's transformation rippled beyond his immediate circle. Ralph's friends, once intimidated by Tony's crew, began to find their voices as well. Inspired by Al's bravery, they started forming a neighborhood watch, creating a safety net for their community. The sense of solidarity grew, fostering a spirit of camaraderie that had been missing for too long. Al's actions sparked a movement, a collective stand against the fear that had stifled their lives. As weeks turned into months, Al found himself in a place of reflection, contemplating the road that had led him to this moment. He remembered the letters he had written in his hospital room, the confessions, the hopes for redemption, and realized they had become the foundation for his new life. He had not only confronted his past, but had also forged a path toward a brighter future. One evening, as he sat on the porch with Ralph watching the sun dip below the horizon, Al understood the magnitude of their fight. "We did it, Ralph," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We faced down the darkness, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who felt trapped." Ralph nodded, a smile breaking through. "And we'll keep facing it together." They shared a moment of silence, the weight of their experiences settling into a comfortable understanding. Al felt grateful for the way they had navigated the storm, their bond forged in the fires of adversity. It was a friendship that had been tested and had emerged stronger, an unwavering testament to the power of solidarity. As they continued to work on their cafe, Al poured his heart into creating a space that radiated warmth and acceptance. He wanted it to be a haven for anyone seeking solace, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, there is always a flicker of light. The cafe became a gathering place for stories to be shared, for connections to be forged. Al found joy in helping others heal, reflecting on his own journey as he inspired those around him. The final confrontation with Tony had become a pivotal moment, a turning point not just for Al, but for the community that had rallied around him. The fear that once loomed large had transformed into a resolve to support one another and reclaim their lives. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined Al. Instead, they became symbols of his strength and his commitment to rise above. As he looked around the bustling cafe, filled with laughter and connection, Al felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He had not just reclaimed his life, he had helped others do the same. He realized that the journey toward healing was far from over, but he was ready to embrace it, armed with the lessons learned and the love surrounding him. In that moment of clarity, Al understood that his story was not just about survival. It was about transformation, resilience, and the power of community. He had found his voice, and with it, a purpose that reached far beyond his own struggles. The future was bright, and for the first time he felt truly alive, ready to face whatever lay ahead, hand in hand with those who mattered most. As Al moved forward, he carried with him the profound understanding that true strength lies not just in confronting one's fears, but in lifting others as you rise. In that spirit, he invited everyone to join him on this journey of healing, connection, and hope. Al's heart swelled with gratitude as he realized the true essence of life lies in the relationships we forge and the love we share. Life's too short to be anything but happy, he thought, smiling at Ralph. Let's keep making it count. With renewed purpose and unwavering support, they stepped into the future, ready to embrace the journey ahead together.